Gentleman yields back. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, thank you for being here. Thank you for your leadership of those 37,000 people you talked about who are busting their tail every day to help protect all of us in this country. We do appreciate that. And I appreciate your comments about Mr. Horowitz's report saying it was unacceptable. But I'm a little concerned because it didn't seem to me that you had quite the same outrage in your response letter to Inspector General Horowitz. December 6, 2019, you wrote a letter. It's the last few pages of Mr. Horowitz's report. In the third sentence of that letter, you said this: the report's findings and recommendations represent constructive criticism that will make us stronger as an organization. Constructive criticism that will make us stronger. Director, you know what we all know. On July 31st, 2016, the FBI opened an investigation, spied on 4 American citizens associated with the presidential campaign. The FBI went to the FISA court and lied to the court 17 times. The FBI took the dossier, the now famous dossier, to the FISA court and didn't tell the court. You just talked about candor to the court. They didn't tell the court the guy who wrote it was desperate, had communicated to the Justice Department he was desperate to stop Trump. Didn't tell the guy who wrote it, Mr. Steele, was paid by the Clinton campaign to put the document together. And when all that's pointed out to you in a 400-page report, you say, thanks for the constructive criticism. 400-page report that says there were 51 assertions the top people at the FBI made to the court that weren't backed up, that weren't supported at all, and it's called constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is when your grade school teacher tells you study more for the spelling test. Constructive criticism is when one of my colleagues says, hey, Jim, you should have asked your questions different last week in a hearing. That's constructive criticism. Here's what Mr. Horowitz said. Here's what the Inspector General said. So many basic and fundamental errors were made by 3 separate hand-picked teams on one of the most sensitive FBI investigations that was briefed to the highest levels in the FBI. Maybe more importantly, here's what Judge Collier wrote. She said this in her public order: the frequency with which representations made by FBI personnel turned out to be unsupported or contradicted by information in their possession and with which they withheld information detrimental to their case calls into question whether information contained in other FBI applications is reliable. Put that in plain English, that's they gave so much wrong information here. How are we supposed to trust any other representations made to the court? Even Jim Comey on December 17th said something I never thought I'd hear Jim Comey say. He said, I was wrong. We were overconfident. So I'm a little concerned. I appreciate what you're saying today, that this is unacceptable. I appreciate what you said a little just to Mr. Gomer's questions about candor to the court. But that's not I mean, what took place in this report is way past constructive criticism. This was a major royal screw up. This is way past constructive criticism.
I'm sorry, is there a question?
There is.
What's the question?
I'm concerned you're not taking this seriously enough. Are you taking it seriously enough, Director Wray?
I think I have demonstrated unambiguously that I take this very seriously. At the same time that the letter that you read occurred, I communicated in no uncertain terms to my leadership team and to the entire FBI workforce that I consider the Inspector General's report to have described conduct that I consider unacceptable.
So it was more than
unacceptable and unrepresentative of who we are as an institution.
Why didn't you write that? Why didn't you write that in the initial? This is it's the last 10 pages of this report.
I addressed the letter because I think the letter, I think to me,
let me point out
describes the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me just point out one of the things you said. One of the recommendations that Mr. Horowitz says is if you're going to do a headquarters special, if you're going to pull this from the field offices, run an investigation out of the headquarters on a sensitive investigative matter, he said you should have some proper protocols in place, some checks and balances. And you said we accept this recommendation. We got to be careful about doing these headquarters specials, which is what the mid-year exam was, what Crossfire Hurricane was. It was run by the top people at the FBI. And as you rightly say, they're all gone. But one of the recommendations that you say you're going to do to deal with this concern, you said we're going to require FBI Deputy Director approval prior to opening any FBI headquarters sensitive investigative matter. Well, Shazam, you know what that means? That means Andy McCabe had to sign off on it. Well, isn't that how we got here to begin with? Andy McCabe has to sign off on it, so now the Deputy Director has to sign off on it if you're going to run an investigation out of headquarters and pull it from the field office? Is that really going to solve this problem?
That's not the complete recommendation or
I'm reading
corrective
it right
action.
here.
No, let me, if I may.
I'm reading it. I'm just reading what you wrote, requiring FBI Deputy Director approval prior to opening any FBI headquarters sensitive investigative matter.
The corrective action that we put in place on that particular issue involved a number of things. One, to communicate to the field that only in the rarest of circumstances, which was not communicated before, should any investigation, sensitive investigation, be conducted out of headquarters. One. Two, that in addition to requiring deputy director sign off for those rare circumstances where that strong presumption would be rebutted, that it not only required sign off by the deputy director, but also by the affected field offices. And that's a difference. That's what's different. So you couldn't have some small group of people at headquarters making the determination that, oh, that this is an exception. Now, the field offices that would otherwise be the presumptive offices to run those investigations, their leadership have to be involved in the discussion so that people can make sure that any decision to do this.
Who makes the
Gentleman's
final?
time has expired, Mr. Deutsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, first I want to add my voice to those who thank you and the 37,000 men and women of the FBI who work every day to keep us safe. I also want to thank the FBI for its work in trying to bring Bob Levinson home. As you know, Bob's the longest held American hostage in history. He went missing off Iran's Kish Island in March of 2007 as he served in the FBI for 25 years. And the Levinson family, its community of Coral Springs, all of Florida and America, are desperate for him to return. And as one of the Bureau's own, I again ask that you prioritize his case in the Bureau and in your interactions with your interagency counterparts. I want to talk a bit about gun violence. And I want to start just by making an observation, and I mean this not as a slight against the ranking member, but every time there is a reference to actions by this committee as drive-bys, a number of us cringe. And I just want to point out that over the past 24 hours, there were drive-by shootings in Connecticut, Texas, Michigan, Illinois, Washington, Nebraska, Florida, and Wisconsin. We're very sensitive. I'm glad you're here to be able to talk about the issue of gun violence. In your testimony, you said the FBI is most concerned about lone offender attacks, primarily shootings, as they've served as the dominant lethal mode for domestic violent extremist attacks. You spoke earlier in your exchange with Mr. Shabbat about the role that Fix Nix has played in helping to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. And so I would ask you whether you believe that Congress should strengthen gun laws to further prevent the types of attacks that you reference.
Well, the FBI won't be taking positions on specific pieces of legislation, but we're happy to provide operational input in the way we normally do on any specific proposal. But I will say that I think we all share the goal of keeping guns out of the hands of those who are prohibited from having them, and things that take steps in that direction, I think, are things we should encourage. We share deeply the concerns about violence committed with guns around this country. And I think we've demonstrated that through our investigations, through our NICS examiners, and through a variety of other means.
Director, I'd just like to follow up on a question that Senator Blumenthal asked you at your confirmation hearing. He asked about whether you would support strengthening gun laws, and specifically mentioned background checks. And you said at the time, and I quote, "I would want to take a look at any specific legislative proposal and get back to you once I had evaluated a specific piece of legislation, but I do support efforts to deal with gun violence aggressively and effectively, and I think my record, both as a line prosecutor and in leadership of the department, is consistent with that," close quote. Director Wray, it's been 343 days since the House passed H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112. The first, as you know, requires background checks on private sales. The second would increase the minimum waiting period from 3 to 10 business days if an initial check is inconclusive. And if an additional 10 days lapse without confirmation of eligibility, then the dealer could sell the firearm to that buyer. Have you had the opportunity over these past 343 days to review those specific proposals?
I have not.
I'll be honest, that's the answer I expected, and yet it's shocking. I understand that the role of the FBI is not to advocate, but I also know that for those 37,000 men and women who are out there every day trying to keep us safe, that we share the same commitment to do everything we can to keep them safe while they're doing their job. And you told Senator Blumenthal that you just needed an opportunity to review before making a determination about whether it could help. You talked today with my colleague, Mr. Shabbat, about how Fix NICS does the job to help keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. There's a piece of legislation that the House passed that would help to do exactly that. And you sit there, Director Wray, and tell us that you haven't really had a chance in 343 days to even consider whether this is the type of thing that can help protect the lives of the public and the lives of those 37,000 men and women who put themselves out there every day to keep us safe. It's beyond discouraging. We need to work together on this. We can't be silent on this. I hope that when the Senate ultimately is forced to take up a piece of legislation that 90% of the American people believe is the right thing to do, that will help keep us safe and your agents safe, that we'll be able to celebrate that together. And until then, I hope that you'll have the opportunity to dig in to understand that what we did here will help to save the lives of the men and women who work for you. I yield back.
Không đi tìm người yêu lý tưởng đâu anh, em không đi tìm người yêu tuyệt đối đâu anh, em không đi tìm người yêu nhan sắc mỹ miều, người yêu đai các cao sang, lụa lá gấm hoa vàng son. Em không đi tìm người yêu đôi trắng thay đen, em không đi tìm người yêu say đắm xa hoa, em không đi tìm người yêu cao quý ngọc ngà, lầu cao xe các anh ơi, có gì vẫn luôn vững bền. Anh ơi, em tìm người yêu chung thủy, em tìm người yêu trong mơ, dẫu nghèo nguyện không đổi lòng. Anh ơi, biết rằng ở đời ai không muốn đẹp giàu và cao sang, vì em nghèo đâu dám mơ. Anh ơi, em tìm người yêu không ước mơ cao, anh ơi em tìm người yêu thương mái tranh xiêu. Mãi đây cho dù rằng đời góc bế chân trời, cuộc đời bão táp phong ba, suốt đời có nhau bên mình. Không đi tìm người yêu lý tưởng đâu anh, em không đi tìm người yêu tuyệt đối đâu anh, em không đi tìm người yêu nhan sắc mỹ miều, người yêu đai các cao sang, lụa lá gấm hoa vàng son. Em không đi tìm người yêu đôi trắng thay đen, em không đi tìm người yêu say đắm xa hoa, em không đi tìm lầu cao xe các anh ơi, có gì vẫn luôn vững bền. Anh ơi, em tìm người yêu chung thủy, em tìm người yêu trong mơ, dẫu nghèo nguyện không đổi lòng. Anh ơi, biết rằng ở đời ai không muốn đẹp giàu và cao sang, vì em nghèo đâu dám mơ. Anh ơi, em tìm người yêu không ước mơ cao, anh ơi em tìm người yêu thương mái tranh xiêu. Mãi đây cho dù rằng đời góc bế chân trời, cuộc đời bão táp phong ba, suốt đời có nhau bên mình. Mãi đây cho dù rằng đời góc bế chân trời, cuộc đời bão táp phong ba, suốt đời có nhau.